All righty. We are live, but we're gonna let it breathe just for a few quick moments here. Then we're gonna get things rocking. And go ahead, Instagram. There we go. Connecting. We're good. Welcome in, everybody. This is not the aftermath episode of the Mile High Huddle podcast. This is a back-to-back gut reaction because boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, we had a explosive Monday with Broncos news. Yeah, we're sifting through the aftermath of the blowout in Baltimore, but we're trying to move on. Broncos, Zach, they moved on quick. They traded Baron Browning to the Arizona Cardinals, and then we learned that they also gave a big fat extension to Jonathan Cooper, so that we know who they chose, right? Who they're keeping, and reporting has it that he signed that contract when they were in Baltimore in the team hotel, and of course they kept it under wraps till today. But your gut reaction to today's tectonic news?
I really like both these moves for the Broncos. I thought they were prudent in both areas, getting something in exchange for Baron Browning, who is no longer in their plans. Nick Benito has stepped up. Cooper has stepped up. Jonah Ellis is developing. They have a couple others, including Dondre Tillman, Drew Sanders coming back from PUP. So he was expendable, and to get anything for him, any sort of capital, was a good move. Cooper, he has earned that, Chad. You want to talk about a workman-like player, blue-collar player. He shows up every week and does his job, doesn't complain, and puts in the dirty work for Denver's defense. He deserves that contract. And kudos for the Broncos getting ahead of it, same way they did with Quinn Miners. Another feather in George Payton's cap from that 2021 class, Chad.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man, because we had some high hopes for Baron Browning. We talked a lot about during the offseason, when we get into the depths of the summer and it's June and early July and we're mostly just projecting and predicting and looking ahead. It's like, man, who's going to break out? I mean, the Broncos have not had a double-digit sack artist since Von Miller and Bradley Chubb both did it in 2018. Think about that. Zach, I mean, that's a long time to not have a double-digit sacker. Could it be Baron Browning? And my answer was, yeah, man, if he can stay healthy, he's the best chance the Broncos have. Boy, was I wrong. Freezing cold take. He wasn't healthy, so I wasn't exactly, Zach, predicting that he would stay healthy, but he failed to stay healthy. When he hit the IR, Nick Benito stepped up, went on that streak, 6 games straight with a sack. Jonathan Cooper, steady as she blows. And you got an opportunity to stockpile a pick, Zach, to build that nest around Bo Nix next year. Adios. We hardly knew ye, and wish you the best, my friend.
Yeah, and even when Baron Browning came back, it just didn't seem like he had it, whether, he was getting his legs under him or whatever, Chad. The defense is just working well with who they have at outside linebacker, and better to not fix what's not broken there. So, like you said, adios, and hope he does well in Arizona.
Now, the details of the Cooper extension, what were your thoughts on lay it out. You had the article for us, but what did the Broncos and Jonathan Cooper agree to?
Yeah, it's 4 years, up to $60 million overall. I don't know the incentives or whatever to get to that number, but it's up to $60 million, $33 million in total guarantees. And listen, for a starting outside linebacker in the NFL, they aren't a common commodity, and they aren't cheap. So to get ahead of that deal because he was going toward free agency was, again, a smart tactical maneuver by George and Sean Payton.
I like Sean. What Scott pointed out here in our private chat. Broncos couldn't gamble on getting a compensatory pick for Browning because they're going to be so active in free agency next year, which is another factor in the calculus. As I just watched the Kansas City Chiefs throw a touchdown, it looks like maybe not worthy. I don't know. Papa Bear checking in. Good to see you, big dog. Hope you're doing well. We love you. We appreciate you. Says, good evening, Broncos country. Hashtag 10 and 7. Let's go, Bo. Yes, indeed. Specifically, we got Sam Bam here. Love you, brother. Thank you. So generous. Both super chats coming in before we even went live, which tells you just how great our community is, and specifically our community of super chat superstars that help us keep the lights on. Thank you, guys. Sam Bam, love you, bro. Says, evening, guys. Tough game yesterday, but I know the Broncos will learn from it and improve upon it. I still like the direction this team is heading under Sean Payton. Go Broncos, 10 and 7 with the playoff berth. I believe. I do too. And as I wrote in that column type of article I published on Saturday, if the Broncos lose to the Ravens, which we know they did, and they did bad, there'll be lessons there that I trust Bo Nix will be able to quickly extract with the help of the coaching staff and move on. We know this because of his history in college. We know this because of the losses that he suffered this year before the Ravens lost. 0-2. Then they go on a little bit of a run. Then a little bit of a step back, Zach, against the Chargers. Then they bounce back with aplomb. So the evidence is there that this can be not only a learning experience, but fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Maybe I'm naive. I just think they caught the Ravens on a bad day, and they had a bad day themselves. It wasn't sustainable putting up 34, 40 points a game as they were trending toward, and they caught, again, a Super Bowl contender that was very pissed off, Chad.
The Duchess jumping in. Love you, Michaela. Another one of our great Super Chat superstars and a member of the family. Michaela says, let me get this straight. We lent Browning to the Cards for a half season for a 6th rounder. Not bad. Cooper's contract makes me so happy. Well-deserved. $60 million, $33 million guaranteed. Yeah, it's really cool for him. I mean, he has the most sacks for any player drafted in the 7th round since 2019. So if you were drafted in the 7th round, 2019 on, he has the most sacks in the NFL. He's doing well. He's, I think, 2nd on the team behind Nick Bonito in sacks as it stands. He's on pace. Not a very productive day yesterday, obviously, Zach, against the Ravens, but Cooper's on pace to land somewhere right around double digits. If he hits, that's kind of the ceiling end. He's about halfway there almost, if memory serves. I don't have his stats right in front of me, but that would be a nice way, Zach, to punctuate the season in which he got this well-deserved extension, to quote Michaela.
Let's remember also he came into the NFL with that heart ablation issue, whatever it was, Chad, when he had that discomfort in his chest area, and it held him out for a little bit of his rookie season. He's a 7th round pick. He didn't have a big college pedigree. Again, just a workman-like player who showed up every day, different defensive schemes, coaching staffs. It doesn't matter. He still performed. He deserves this contract.
Agreed, 100%. And thank you, Michaela. And Scott's reminding me, 5.5 sacks. So, yeah, he's right about halfway to double digits, and that's about where you need to be because we're about halfway through the season. It's unfortunate now, Zach, that there is no even number in terms of the number. I mean, if the league gets its way, there will be. We'll have 19 weeks and 18 games, but I'm hoping Scott did the math. He's on pace for 10.4 sacks. So 10.5 sacks he's on pace for. We'll see. It could end up being more because sometimes the way it goes, sacks come in bunches, and just ask Von Miller. Lawrence Rivera checking in. What's up, my brother? He says, what's up, guys? Today is a great day. I won Colorado Eagles tickets for tomorrow off the radio, and I never win nothing. Dude, that's really cool. Congratulations to you. That'll be a real neat experience, and I'm happy to hear that it came through for you. The universe delivered you up a cool experience. That's rad.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, Lawrence. Appreciate you sharing that.
Okay, so a couple other things here, Zach. Courtland Sutton. I just published an article by Nick Kendall reporting on, I think it was Tom Pelissero, saying, hey, as things get, as we inch ever closer to the NFL trade deadline, don't lose sight of the name Courtland Sutton as a possible selling. Broncos so far have been sellers. They could stick to that. Fans have kind of been more like, we need to buy a tight end. We need to go out and buy maybe another receiver to complement Sutton. But he's still, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise, Zach, considering that Sutton's been in just about every wide receiver trade rumor dating back 3.5 years, it seems like, up to this point. But one thing interesting from the Pelissero report, and this was him on, I think it was the Rich Eisen podcast, he was talking about this, is that the Broncos aren't just going to give him away. They have a really high ask for Courtland Sutton. They'll only move him if they receive that ask, and Nick kind of speculates that it would be basically a 2nd rounder or get off my lawn type situation, because you trade away Courtland Sutton, you're not only robbing from a kind of struggling unit overall, or a unit that's yet to kind of come into its own, Zach, but literally Bo Nix's only reliable target, and the only player you could argue at this point is the Broncos' only above average skill position player.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I've been calling for the Broncos to get a tight end, running back, receiver, just Bo Nix more help. The last thing I want them to do is take away the little help that Bo Nix does have. And, if let's say you get a third-round pick for Cortland Sutton, fourth-round pick, what would you end up doing with that draft pick? You would end up drafting a receiver. And what are the odds that receiver would end up as good as Cortland Sutton, who's really a high-end wide receiver too in the NFL? So I'd rather keep what they have, Chad, and they have capital to burn. If they want to ship a mid-rounder to whoever for a tight end or a receiver, they could still do that. It doesn't have to be either or.
Well said. Well said. We also have here the Ronk checking in. What's up, bro? Always great to see the mayor of the MHH Facebook community, Michael Ronquillo, throwing down with his Mile High salute as well. Good evening, Chad and Zach on the Mile High Huddle podcast. Aftermath, go Bo Broncos. Yeah, I mean, look, we could sit and pick through the bones here of Broncos, Ravens, and continue the postmortem. And if you guys have specific topics or questions in that realm, happy to do it. But as I'm watching right now, the Bucks take on the Chiefs, man. Broncos have turned the page probably by now. They're not going to really get back to practice till middle of the week, but they can't linger on this one too long, Zach. If they allow them, just like a cornerback, got to have that short memory. If they allow themselves to linger on this brutal loss, it wasn't just a close one, right? This is is it the second blowout loss Sean Payton's had as a head coach in Denver? I mean, the Dolphins game and this game. Has there been a multi-score, big-time blowout loss besides those two? So don't linger on it. Move on. Chiefs.
There was the Lions game last year, but we all chose to forget that.
That's right.
I would be surprised, too, if they haven't buried the film already and took out what they could from it and moved on to Kansas City. They're catching KC on a short week of rest for them, so that's a positive for Denver. And I found it interesting that Sean Payton and Riley Moss said the same thing about yesterday's game, is that they have to look inward, is that you have to look at yourself, what you can do better, what you can do worse in some cases, and go out there and execute to the best of your ability. So I agree with you, Chad. I think they did move on, and they have another big test coming up in Sunday against KC.
MBLEX test prep. What's up, brother? Thank you. Says Taysom Hill would look great in Denver, boys. Yeah, interesting because, he's one of those Swiss Army knife type of players. You can use him in a lot of different ways. Saints have been trying him in recent years along with other things as a tight end. Tight end, Zach, is a position of need for the Broncos. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they got an offer. I mean, hey, we'll give you a cup of coffee for Greg Dulcich. It wouldn't surprise me if they trade him. He has become such a non-factor. He's just like a regular healthy scratch now. So
yep.
I could see it. But to me, Taysom Hill joining Sean Payton as yet another Saint in Denver would really come down to the price. So it's like, what would he be worth? What could you live with in trade to acquire a Taysom Hill, Zach?
A couple things about this. Number one, I know the Saints fired Dennis Allen today, but I read that they're not going to have a fire sale. So they're not going to get Taysom Hill for a song. They're not going to give him away if he's even available. Number two, you brought up what I was going to say is that I'm going to have the story for the website after the podcast, but the Broncos are open to trading Greg Dulcich in addition to trading Baron Browning. The problem is the issue with Dulcich is the issue with Taysom Hill. He can't stay healthy. He just came back from a rib injury a couple weeks ago as it is, Chad, and plays different positions, gets hit a lot, gets beat up. I don't know that I would want to spend capital and money on someone like that. Just a proven, reliable guy with a little bit of upside. That's what I want in my tight end.
As Scott points out here, the problem with doing business with the Saints, all these players have huge dead cap hits because of how New Orleans does their business. So 26 million dead cap if you acquire Taysom Hill. I mean, that's a brutal disincentive if I've ever seen one, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos are in no position to just take on a luxury player for the sake of it with the Russell Wilson dead money and all that. I like Taysom Hill for what he can do. He's like the modern-day Cordell Stewart. He can throw, he can run, he can catch, but the financial concerns, the injury concerns, and also the fact that the Saints might not want to trade him. It takes two to tango.
Interesting point here from Michael Ronquillo. I heard that Sean Payton will play Audric Estime, the rookie running back, more despite the fumbling. He's talking about it, and you saw that, look, they're not they need help wherever they can get it at the skill positions. And yeah, you got the fumbling thing to be very aware of and continue to monitor if you're the Broncos. But they gave him, what was it, 5 carries in garbage time yesterday, and he provided a very healthy, again, garbage time. So you got to think about the fronts the Ravens were playing in as the Broncos were just, lining up in throwing type packages. But still, Zach, 7 yards a carry is what he averaged. Again, in garbage time, that's not nothing when, Javonte Williams is struggling to even get 3.5.
Couldn't even get 6 inches on that 4th down call. I know it was the pitch play or whatever, but here's my hot take. I don't care about the fumbling. You can coach out fumbling. Like Tiki Barber used to hold the ball by his neck, Chad. You can't teach vision or athleticism or speed to get to the edge. I want to see what Audric Estime can do, because we've seen what Javonte Williams is post-injury. That is a washed shot running back who averages about 3 yards a carry. I will take anyone auditioning right now for that job, Estime included.
We also have here Lawrence saying, honestly think Bologna. I honestly think Bologna can be a superstar. I'm trying to see
Bo
could be a superstar. Best thing to help him right now is being able to audible plays himself. I think he's earned it now. What do you think? Thank you. See, in real time, I need Zach to help me get there.
Just guess.
I agree with you. He's got the makings of a franchise guy. Is he? Does he have the makings of like a superstar? Because who do you think of, Zach, at the quarterback position when you hear that word superstar? Because to me, in today's league, I think Patrick Mahomes, I think Lamar Jackson, I think Josh Allen. There's a few other qualifiers, but do you see Bo Nix as having that level of upside if everything came together perfectly, ideally? Not to say when, but if it does, do you see that as a ceiling for him?
It's so hard to say, because what he did in college, his ceiling in college might not be his ceiling in the NFL. He's still growing, but I could say from his dual threat ability, he can be hovering near that tier 1. Might not be in that tier, but Chad, he's the Broncos' best offensive player. That's not hot take. That's not hyperbole. He's the one that goes out there every Sunday and competes, and he's the one that's even catching touchdowns now, in addition to throwing for him and running for them. So I don't know what he can be, but I know that he is getting better as the weeks go on, and as long as he can be above average with the defense they have, that's a playoff team.
Well said. We also have RD checking in up there north of the 49th parallel in Canada, proving Broncos country is not a geographic location. It's a state of being. He says, what do you think is wrong with Marvin Mims Jr., that he can't get reps over Lil Jordan Humphrey? Even Troy Franklin, who keeps dropping dimes, gets more targets. First of all, it is a big disappointment that Mims is just not coming along. We didn't really see big, dough moments from Mims yesterday, but I think back even, Zach, to that Panthers game, and there was that just dumb miscue over the middle, splitting the seam, that he wasn't able to connect with Bo Nix. And it comes down to, honestly, with Marvin Mims, it comes down to the mental. There's some mental block there that is preventing him from capitalizing on what is phenomenal athleticism and phenomenal talent. And that's a big deal to coaches, and that's a big deal in the league. In the NFL, Zach, you can't just be good. Everybody's good. What separates the fringe guys from the role players, and the role players from the starters, and the starters from the superstars, is the mental. It's what takes place between the ears, and I don't know that Mims is there yet, for whatever it's worth. That doesn't mean he's, can't develop or he won't develop, but obviously, Zach, so far, very disappointed in what we hope to see from him in year 2.
Yeah, I mean, the way you were describing him, it reminded me of a former Bronco who today announced his retirement, former Broncos receiver Cody Latimer, in the sense that high-round draft pick Chad had all the physical talent in the world, but can never put it all together and never became what he could be. I don't know if that's the case with Marvin Mims, whether he's going to be just a strict kick returner, special teamer, or it's the Sean Payton cronyism, playing his guys, wanting Lil Jordan Humphrey on the field, and the Michael Burtons and Nate Atkins of the world, and not entrusting the Marvin Mims and Troy Franklins of the world. I don't know what it is, but you said it best earlier, that the only receiver that Bo Nix really has chemistry with is Courtland Sutton. Everyone else, it seems like it's almost the first time they've ever played together sometimes.
Yeah. It's tough, man. And I think it's more just because he's a Sean Payton guy too. I mean, Sean Payton drafted him his maiden draft class in Denver. I just think it's something going on between the ears with Mims. George Fox, good to see you, brother. He says, yesterday was a bad day. Now we see what kind of team do we have. Pick up the pads, get refocused on what we want our team to look like. Thanks, guys, for what you do for us. Hit the thumbs up, guys. Broncos for life, MHH for life. Yeah, brother. Thank you, George. Eric Flynn checking in as well. Great to see you, big dog. Thank you for the stars. Throwing down so consistently on Facebook. Thank you, buddy. Means the world to us. We also have Phil McLaughlin down in Tucson. Tucson Phil, as he's known. Good evening, Chad, Zach, and Deacon Scott. Who else do you think are possible trade candidates by tomorrow? I like a sixth for Browning. Was surprised we got that much for him. Hashtag Buckham. MHH for life. Broncos for life. Yeah, considering he spent half this season on injured reserve, you got something out of him. He's been relegated basically to a below average role player at rush linebacker, and you're going to watch him walk away in the offseason anyway. So adios. I thought that was solid value. I mean, he's a former third-round pick, but you can't really look at it that way. He was going to be gone in 3 months' time anyway. But Zach, aside from Courtland Sutton, as I mentioned earlier, is a name that has continually been floated. Do you see any other names here for Phil to keep an eye on?
I would say Greg Dulcich only because that's been reported and he's obviously out of the Broncos' plans. I would take a bag of dirty laundry for Greg Dulcich at this point, Chad, similar to Baron Browning. I'm going to throw one more out there because I don't think the Broncos really have any players that are worth anything to other teams except for PS2. Damari Mathis, cornerback, excess player, former starter, maybe a contender thinks they can get him for cheap. He can fill in whatever. That might be one, but the only other one we heard, Phil, except for Sutton, was Greg Dulcich.
Indeed. I hope, and I don't think it'll happen, but I hope Garrett Bowles is not on that list. I mean, yeah, he had that big snafu on Bo Nix's what would have been his second touchdown. This one, a rushing score. But overall, he actually played pretty well as a blocker. That was especially in pass blocking. So I hope they don't do anything with Bowles, but I think we've touched on all the names really to keep an eye on. But the Broncos, Zach, they're at 5-4. They can't afford to. I mean, if they really do want to try and make something of this season, they're already, in a sense, it feels like anyway, Zach, playing with house money. And in that they're early on, first half of the season, exceeded almost everyone's expectations. Getting out to a 5-3 start, that's a big deal. And that affords them the opportunity to push. There's a reason why the trade deadline is where it is in an NFL season. Teams like the Broncos, who are kind of on the cusp, if the playoffs were starting this coming weekend, your Denver Broncos would be the 7th seed in the AFC, the last wild card team, the caboose going into the playoffs. Is that how it's going to look in December? Time will tell, Zach, but that's a big decision. Because if you're going to be pushing for that, and they have to, I mean, that's what they have to tell themselves. The players, they got to be able to look these players in the eye and say, when we're demanding your best on the field, there's a reason for that. You start selling off too many guys at this stage, you run the risk, Zach, of sending the wrong message if you're trying to make as much hay out of this season as possible, considering your 5-3 start. We'll say 5-4 start now.
Yeah, if they would have beat Baltimore yesterday, I would have convinced they would have made a move at the deadline for some sort of help, Bo Nix receiving talent or otherwise. Now I'm not so sure. You got Sean Payton come out earlier today and saying, we're probably going to stand pat. Superman's not walking through that door. But like an hour after he said that, Browning was traded. Cooper was extended. We had the Dulcich rumor come out. So it's going to be kind of a wild touch and go next however many hours until the deadline. We'll see what happens.
All right, guys, lots more to get to. We're at about 25 minutes. We're doing pretty good with time. Before we get any further, we got to talk to you about Underdog Fantasy, okay? Because Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players by selecting simply higher or lower or two or more players' stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. So look at it like this. Do you think Bo Nix is going to rack up higher than, say, 2 touchdown passes next week? Or is Javonte Williams going to get lower than 50 yards rushing? You feel me? Cook up some entries for a shot to win real cash prizes all football season long. And it's easy to get started. You download the app today, use our code MHuddle to get $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's the download the app for Underdog Fantasy. Our code MHuddle, get $1,000 up to in bonus cash right out of the gates. And then also, listen, you have to be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alaska, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado. For some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncgambling.org. AZ 1-800-NEXT-STEP or next step. Text it to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE New York or text HOPE New York 467-369. Okay, back to the chat we go. Underdog Fantasy, thank you very much. Love partnering up with you. Okay, where are we at, Mr. Producer? We have Michaela, the Duchess, jumping back in. Why don't we trade for a receiver? We need help. Zach, the Broncos could use some help, but again, you start looking at, well, if you're trying to build the nest around Bo Nix, you're going to be giving up. If that player is going to actually be able to help you, odds are he's going to cost you something premium, Zach. And that's a premium pick that you could use next year. And there's no guarantee you're going to have 4 years of control over a guy you acquire in a trade today.
Yeah, you're probably going to end up using that pick though to draft a receiver. And again, what are the odds that receiver is going to be as proven as the guy you'd be trading for? I'd rather just have the experience commodity there, Chad. But Michaela, Peyton also talked about this today when he said there's a lot that goes into bringing in a new player, the fit in the locker room, the fit on the field, the chemistry, everything, the cost, salary cap, and maybe the Broncos don't feel like they can add to it in the post-Russell Wilson era, or Sean Payton feels his guys, the ones he's coaching, the ones he selects to be on the field, little Jordan Humphrey, are better than anyone else is out there.
Yeah. Taylor Christensen, good to see you, bro. Good moves today. Any news about anything else? Nothing by way of transaction. We touched on the rumor mill. Keep an eye on Cortland Sutton. Keep an eye on Greg Dulcich. But honestly, I have a real hard time, Zach, seeing any team out there ponying up a draft pick to acquire Greg Dulcich. I mean, even a player. So I'm guessing that's about what it's going to be. Never say never. It is the NFL, but I think what the little flurry of activity you saw today, dealing away Baron Browning to the Cardinals, and the news of Jonathan Cooper's extension, I'm guessing, if I had to, wager a little bit and go on record, I'm guessing that's pretty much it for the Broncos.
Yeah, and Todd's asking, wait, what? We traded Baron Browning. Yeah, Baron Browning, for anyone who's tuning in late, was traded to the Arizona Cardinals today for a 2025 6th-round draft pick. So adios, Baron. It's all Jonathan Cooper time now. Nick Bonito, Jonah Ellis. That's the future of the Broncos edge room.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, though, is the fan base still wants the Broncos to be buyers because, you got out to a 5-3 start. Now you're 5-4, but it's just a tough decision, man. It's tough because this particular season, Zach, it was your first draft with a first-round pick in how many years? You had to deal with the 2 from Russ and then missing the 1 with Sean Payton. I mean, they finally have a solid draft class, and then they're going to go trading away more picks because they want to make hay. I mean, really, you got to get the guys who are on your roster. The Broncos have talent. Figure out how to get them rolling. I think that's where they're at because the whole thing with Bo Nix, yeah, everyone at Broncos HQ, Zach, feels the pressure to deliver something for the fans this year. It's been so long, right? 8 long years. That pressure exists, but it can't eclipse the long-term viability of building the nest around Bo Nix. So all those factors have to align if the Broncos make any move, whether they're selling or buying.
Yeah, you mentioned who the Broncos drafted. Marvin Mims a couple years ago, Troy Franklin this year, and those are the players that are disappointing the most on Sundays. It's the reason why most of us want the Broncos to be buyers to some extent. And I'm not saying ship away multiple first round picks, but I can't see an argument, Chad, really. If you can acquire a veteran receiver or a veteran tight end for a fourth or fifth, let's say you assume half or most of his salary, what is really the downside if the goal is to evaluate Bo Nix? That would be helping the evaluation of Bo Nix.
Good point. George Fox jumping in again to say, do you see us picking up a running back, maybe from Jacksonville? Broncos for life, MHH for life. What do you think, Zach?
There's one I want in Jacksonville. It's not ETN. I would want Tank Bigsby, but he's the starter there now. I would, I guess, like ETN. There's some injury concerns, but he's a 3-down guy, can catch, can run. I wouldn't be opposed depending on the cost, George.
Opethian says, I'd hate to see a team go out and get Njoku, Cleveland Browns tight end David Njoku, for a 5th round pick.
I would be pissed.
Yeah. What rumors have you heard on Njoku today?
Yeah, I was going to bring it. I think it was, I can't remember, Jordan Schultz or some NFL insider reported that despite receiving trade interest, I wonder if it's Denver, Cleveland is not expected to trade Njoku by tomorrow's deadline. If it was a 5th round, I would run that to Cleveland's headquarters myself. But it looks like Njoku, the tribal chief, is staying in Cleveland.
This is really a good point here, I think, Zach, from Colin Wood. And, we're talking about rationale. We're talking about logic and pragmatism. And sometimes when you're pragmatic, it can be not necessarily what you want to hear, but it's the right thing. And Colin says, I know, I'm just saying there isn't any move we could make this year at the trade deadline that's actually going to move that needle significantly. So in other words, you look at it like this. You go out and trade for an Njoku, for example. How many additional wins is that going to deliver the Broncos, Zach, that they were already going to get or weren't, whatever. If you're predicting, say, we're sitting here at 5-4, we're predicting 9-8 or a 10-7, whatever. If you get Njoku, does that change anything?
Yes, because one win could be the difference between a playoff berth and sitting at home this January, Chad, this winter. 10-7 could be guaranteed. 9-8, you could be left out in the dust. And look at yesterday's game, the missed Troy Franklin touchdown. If that was caught by a reliable receiver, it's a different ball game. Who knows what happens after that? It's worth the shot, Colin. I don't really subscribe to this. It's too black and white for me. If he changes the course of one game with one touchdown, whoever it may be, Njoku or not, that could be the difference in the Broncos making the playoffs, having a winning record or not. I think it's worth the gamble.
It's a fair argument. My question would just simply come down to at what cost. Njoku, I mean, a 5th round pick. What was he? A former 2nd rounder, if memory serves? Wasn't he originally a 2nd round pick?
I think he was a 1st round pick.
Was he?
I might be wrong.
Let me go to his wiki. Just a refresher. So yeah, you're right. 1st round pick, 29th overall.
He's a beast.
So, if he ends up getting dealt like, 5th mid-round pick, yeah, it's going to be some hurt feelings around Denver. But, if you could take that 6th round pick that you got in the Browning trade, maybe parlay that with an additional mid to late round pick, I wouldn't hate it for a player that you were that confident could impact the bottom line immediately. But I don't know what his contract situation is. I haven't examined that with David Njoku.
I would go all the way up. I know it's not great, a bunch of dead money on the deal. I would go up, though, if Cleveland's willing to eat some of that. I'd go up to a 3rd round pick to take Njoku off their hands, Chad, because, again, if you want to draft a tight end in the 3rd round in 2025, he's not going to be as good, at least initially, as David Njoku. He's a good pass catcher, good run blocker, good team player. He would instantly transform this Broncos offense.
Yeah, there is quite a lot of dead money on his deal. A lot of those void years, similar type of thing that the Saints like to do. Anyway, Colin, thank you, big dog. Let me take a peek here. Yeah, 30 million dead cap. Oof, ouch, ouchie, ouchie. Let me see here. String guy, always reliable, always consistent in the chat. Chad, Zach, we have 8 games left. How many of those games do you think we can win? Zach, I can bring up the schedule, but what's your answer here for String Guy?
Yeah, after every game, I tweet the Broncos' next 5 opponents. 'Cause I like to just break it down, in chunks like that. So the Broncos have at Kansas City, home for Atlanta, at Vegas, home for Cleveland, and home for Indy. That 5-game stretch, Chad, I really can't see the Broncos being worse than 3-2 if they have any sort of playoff aspirations. So, String Guy, I haven't really extrapolated to the rest of the season. It gets a little tougher toward the end, but they can still, if they play up to par, win 10 games. They could go 10-7. It's not crazy.
Okay, so I'm going to be I'll use that word again. I'm going to be as pragmatic as I can be. So I'm going to be as conservative as I can be, is another way of saying it in this case. And just say, okay, I'm just going to say this again. Worst case scenario, loss. So now they're at Chiefs, loss. Okay. Now they're 5-5. Falcons at home after 2 straight losses type thing, bounce back. I could see that being a win. So I think one of these 2 games they'll win. One of these 2 games they lose. So I'm just going to say 6-5. Okay,
Yeah.
at the Raiders. Now keep in mind, they've never won in that building. So, but I still think it's a win. So 7-5. Home against the Browns, I'm going to say 8-5. Then they get their bye. For a team, Zach, that is actually trying to make something of this season, that could be, and especially the way things have shook out for the Broncos up to this point, that could be a very fortuitous bye.
Yep.
But then you get home against the Colts. I would see that as a probable win.
Joe
So
Flacco revenge game.
Right. Mile High Joe. So what would that be? 9-5? All right. At LA, just to hedge, I'll say loss. 9-6. At the Bengals and the Chiefs. That's a tough way to end the season, even with the Bengals, their situation. So I think they're angling for something still. They're in that window of 8 to 10 wins team if things line up. Like if they're able to continue building and growing and they don't squander that winning of 5 out of 6 in the first 2 frames of the season.
It's if we get the good Broncos versus the bad Broncos, they can win 9-10 games and make a playoff run. If an injury strikes, God forbid, or they play down to their level of competition or just don't show up like yesterday, they can go 7-10. But we're optimistic around these parts, Chad, and they're getting better, I think, not worse overall.
Colin brings up Mike Shanahan got fired because we kept going 9-7, 8-8, 7-9. And that's a fair point. However, you got to remember the complexion of that trio of seasons. He made a very fateful decision in 2006. Well, first of all, to draft Jay Cutler. So to use a first round pick on a player that, you had your team in the AFC title game 2 months prior. That's a first round pick that could have gone to helping Jake Plummer win. All right. But they take a quarterback. Then you get to the season. Jake Plummer is winning ball games. He has the Broncos in the lead in the AFC West, but he comes off, I think it was 2 straight losses, and they were still leading in the AFC West. So Shanahan, impatient to get to his first-round pick, benches Plummer, and the Broncos end up missing the playoffs that year. Plummer's gone. It ushers in the Jay Cutler era, and they just couldn't make hay. Even 2008, the last Shanahan season, which is also Jay Cutler's one and only Pro Bowl nod, they got out to a really good start. A lot of things went their way, but then they lost their last 3 with Zach. The final game, again, this is why complexion of how these things happen matters. They go into that season finale against the San Francisco 49ers and Alex Smith before he became Alex Smith, okay? Win and you're in at home. And Shanahan's Broncos lost that game. So all those things combined, that's why they ended up moving on from Shanahan. And he was, at the time, the longest tenured head coach in the NFL when he was fired.
Yeah, the difference too is the Broncos didn't trade a first and second round pick for him, and they didn't pay him $18 million a year. It's apples and oranges, Colin. Sean Payton has a lot of job security. He can have another honeymoon season and still come back and not think about it twice in 2025. So let's just hope they don't go that way and they can break the curse sooner than later.
Brandon Williams wants to know, and then we're about out of here. So this is your 2-minute warning, everybody. Get your burning topics, questions, supers in the chat if there's anything we haven't touched on. He says, off topic, but looking ahead to the Chiefs game, How does Xavier Worthy compare to Zay Flowers? Do you think Denver will have an answer for his speed?
They're similar, but to me, in my opinion, different in the sense that Zay is more of a complete receiver, whereas Worthy right now as a rookie is straight 9 route, go route, run straight line very fast down the field. Where Zay Flowers can work the middle. He's an expert separator, really good receiver, doesn't get a lot of credit. So they're going to have to bracket Worthy. It's going to be a challenge. Hopefully PJ Locke comes back because Devin Key was a disaster. Brandon Jones is going to be up to par, hopefully, for that. Riley Moss, maybe even Pat Surtain. Just don't let him beat you deep. That's really all he can do right now.
Man, it is kind of crazy looking at the Chiefs on Pro Football Reference. You know, Travis Kelce leads with 38 receptions. This doesn't count tonight, obviously, but he leads 38 receptions for 335 yards, 1 touchdown. Rashee Rice, second on the team with 24 receptions and just under 300 yards. Then Worthy with 19 receptions, 235 yards, but he's got a team high 3 receiving touchdowns. So, like Zach just said, really it's Kelce over the middle and the seams and protecting against that 9 route speed that Worthy brings to the table. And I got to believe that the Broncos, you know, they got punched in the mouth. It was a reality check, and that speed, and they have to have some kind of an answer, because it's not going to be the last time they face an explosive vertical threat like that. It's also, Zach, no coincidence that the Broncos looked the way they looked because they were trying to throw a little something different at Lamar Jackson that he hadn't seen.
Yeah.
I'm watching what Riley Moss said after the game, talking about how, you know, well, it was kind of tough. We were running some zone and no, this isn't a defense built to run zone on the reg. Every time we've seen them deploy it, Zach, brutal. I mean, the Dolphins game, this game, you just got to kind of live and die by what you do. You got to live and die by your strengths and what your guys know. And this team lives and dies by the man principles that, honestly, what success Vance Joseph has conjured as a coordinator in this league and as a defensive mind, that's it. That's what his philosophy is. And when he gets off of that beat, that's when things go sideways for the Broncos.
Yeah, KC also has DeAndre Hopkins, the veteran, who's looking pretty good tonight, actually. Their ground game, they're really a run-first team. You know, Patrick Mahomes is a lot more of a game manager than he was years ago. They are Kareem Hunt, Carson Steele, whoever else they have in the backfield used to be Pacheco, but they're going to run the ball first and foremost. The Broncos have to fix that from yesterday, Chad. It was not good enough.
Yes, indeed. So lots of food for thought for the Broncos, lots to, again, how quickly can they extract those lessons, put them to use? Because it's on the fly. I mean, they're watching this game. Chiefs currently losing to the Bucs. It's going to be interesting to see. And I always root for a Chiefs loss. I mean, it's just in my nature, Zach. But there's a part of me that's like, do I want them to lose this game at home to the Bucs? Because if they lose this game, they're going to be kind of like the Ravens last week, all the more motivated to come out and dominate. So it's kind of a tough situation. But at the end of the day, Chiefs need to stack up some losses if the Broncos are going to have the best hope of making the playoffs.
Well, on the plus, though, the Broncos took the Bucs to the woodshed in Tampa Bay. So if the Bucs did beat Kansas City, it would make that victory look that much more powerful, Chad.
True, but they didn't have Vita Vea, and I've been watching him already doing some good things. So for the Bucs. So, but anyway, your point still absolutely applies here. All right, guys, we have a few messages for you. Then we're going to dip on out.
Can't believe it's been 45 minutes already. Another tremendous episode, as always, of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, follow us on X at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account on X at Mile High Huddle. Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch like we're rocking each and every single podcast, check out mhhmerch.com. Get you some. If you haven't done so yet, drop us a like at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, y'all, please, please, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
A mile high salute and a special shout out to the great Super Chat superstars of MHH showing out tonight, helping us keep the lights on, like David McElrath, the Papa Bear, Sam Bam, both of whom dropped their supers before we even went live. Lawrence Rivera, the Duchess, Mount Rushmore, the Ronk, Mount Rushmore, MBLEX Test Prep. I said Lawrence, RD, George Fox, Eric Flynn, Phil McLaughlin on Facebook. Taylor Christensen, so reliable and consistent, huge part of our Super Chat superstar community. We love you guys. Thank you so much. And Zach and I are off until Thursday. So we'll see how this game, some of you will be listening to this and it'll be Tuesday. By the way, hey, regardless of what side of things you come down on, go vote. Make sure you vote tomorrow. If you haven't voted already, crucial. Our duty as Americans, take care of that business. At least that's what I advocate for anyway. Yeah. But can't wait to see you on Thursday, and we'll see how things look after tomorrow, not only for the Denver Broncos relative to the Chiefs, but what direction the United States of America is headed.
And also the trade deadline's tomorrow, so a busy day, and I echo what Chad said. Go out there and vote. We'll see you Thursday. Take care, and as always, go Broncos.